everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 53 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. Pursuant to the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, January 18, 2022, the committee is meeting on the study of the federal government consulting contracts awarded to McKinsey and Company. I'm informed the committee that all witnesses appearing by video conference have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Just quickly at the very end, before we actually start subcommittee, there's a couple items I have to go over that I need feedback on from the committee, please. So I just need a couple minutes there, and then we'll go into subcommittee. And we'll start by welcoming Minister Fraser. Welcome to OGGO. I've been here 7 years, and we haven't seen you before, so welcome to your inaugural appearance with OGGO. Go ahead. I understand you have an opening statement for 5 minutes, please. The floor is yours, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps over 7 years why you've not seen me, as I've only been in this position for a small fraction of that time. So happy to make my inaugural appearance. Merci, Messieurs les Présidents et chers collègues, de m'avoir invité à participer à la discussion.
Thank you, Chair, and dear colleagues, for the invitation to join discussion about IRCC's work with McKinsey and Company.
This room is familiar with some of the challenges that Canadian businesses are facing as they seek to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. We could pore over the labor force statistics survey to figure out the extent of the labor shortage in Canada if we wanted to, but my view is you can figure out the reality by walking down Main Street of almost any community in Canada. You're going to find help wanted signs in the window. A lot of this is happening at a time when immigration is already representing an extraordinary majority of our growth in the Canadian labor force. We need to continue to train our domestic workforce, there's no question. But it's not possible to meet the needs of the economy in the short or long term without embracing immigration as a key part of our strategy for growth. The fact of the matter is we need more workers in just about every sector in every region of this country. In November of this past year, I announced that Canada is going to be increasing our annual immigration levels targets from 431,000 this past year to 465,000 this year, going to 500,000 by 2025. Ces objectifs sont appuyés par un plan.
These objectives are supported by a plan that's decided to meet the needs of Canadians' economy, and this involves the settling of our new arrivals and the qualities in communities have more absorption capacities.
That a department might seek external advice on how to face certain challenges with its various departments or to achieve ambitious goals. But just to be clear, the advice that we may have received over the course of a couple of contracts with McKinsey prior to my appointment to this position, I didn't actually touch on immigration policy, but rather efforts to digitize the process through which applications are processed at IRCC. And for what it's worth, for the sake of clarity, since being appointed as minister, or for that matter, before, I don't have a relationship with representatives of McKinsey or Dominic Barton, if anybody had been curious. The company had not advised me directly or influenced the decision-making about our immigration levels plan, which I know has been the source of some commentary, but I would suggest it's without basis. The decision made on immigration levels, on the number of newcomers that we welcome to Canada and how we envision the future of our country's population, ultimately fall to me in my capacity as the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship to determine. Although this is a decision I've arrived at independently, I do take advice from a number of different groups, whether that's department officials or I would argue most importantly, organizations, stakeholders, provincial and territorial governments and businesses and people across Canada who understand the needs of Canada over the course of the next generation and how immigration may play a key role in determining our country's future. It was on the basis of those conversations and my independent reflection that we landed on appropriate levels for immigration as published in the Immigration Levels Plan. McKinsey was engaged, as I mentioned before. I was appointed as minister on 2 instances through an open bidding process that was run by the department under their authority to do so. Those particular contracts were designed to provide advice around the modernization of the immigration system and to enhance digital services, which are rolling out as we speak, although I would suggest that there is greater benefits to be seen in the years ahead as we move to a fully digitized system. Au cours des dernières années et même avant la pandémie.
In recent years and even before the pandemic, an unprecedented number of people chose to come to Canada. On the one hand, this was a good thing for our country, but on the other hand, there was no doubt that the system and processes that were aging at the department, and they were not up to the increased demand.
IRCC relies on different partnerships to improve the way that we serve clients. Sometimes we have to rely on third parties to provide specialized expertise for a specific and typically time-limited purpose. That's why in 2018, the department determined it needed specific expertise to review how they serve clients and to recommend improvements. This resulted in 2 contracts between 2018 and 2020 being awarded to McKinsey. It represented, for what it's worth, in those particular years, less than 1% of the department's operating expenditures. The first contract provided an assessment and a set of recommendations to improve digital and other services and begin the digital transformation process, which is ongoing today. While the department moved ahead to implement some of those recommendations, it established the second contract, again on a competitive basis, in order to grow its internal capacity and to help IRCC employees gain specialized expertise themselves and to accelerate the department's ability to carry on with the work to transform the digital system that we're moving towards, with a focus on improving client service. Le travail effectué dans le cadre de ces contrats.
During these contracts, the work allowed us to identify gaps and opportunities to improve service delivery and developed a transformation strategy. This was complete with a step-by-step plan and 2 new operating models. One to deliver more efficient processes, and the other to deliver digital solutions for IRCC's clients.
I suspect I'm getting close to the end of my 5 minutes.
You're past it if you could finish up.
Comments there. No, that's fine, Mr. Chair. I think you've got a flavor for my commentary today, and happy to move to questions that committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kusi for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. Minister, in an article published by the CBC on January 24th, 2023, 2 public servants in your department came forward about the role McKinsey had been playing in policy decisions of the department. And one source told the media that McKinsey was an idea from the government. The policy was decided for civil servants. It caused a lot of operational instability. So why is your government, why are you as a minister allowing a firm such as McKinsey to make policy decisions instead of public servants?
For the sake of clarity, I would certainly dispute that McKinsey is making policy decisions on behalf of the government. That is not a fact. For what it's worth, you framed your question, and why would I as minister? We're dealing with 2 contracts that were awarded internally by the department before my appointment to this position. In any event, this is an ordinary exercise where the department was seeking to grow its capacity to offer digital services. We're in the midst of a major digital transformation within IRCC that I do believe will end up with a better product for IRCC's clients. People seeking to be reunited with families or coming to seek opportunities. And I do believe the movement to a digital transformation within our systems is the right approach.
Minister, that's not what I asked. I was asking you specifically about McKinsey's implication in determining policy for your department. Why is your government allowing McKinsey to make policy decisions instead of public servants?
Ms. Kusi, that is not happening. If there's a specific policy you would like to ask the origins of, I would be happy to give my perspective. But the decisions that I've made have not been made on the basis of McKinsey's direction. I can reassure you that.
That's not what your civil servant said, and that's not what the CBC reported. The same CBC article, Minister, also said the IRCC sources are also critical of McKinsey's possible influence over Canada's immigration targets. Ottawa announced a plan this fall to welcome 500,000 new permanent residents each year by 2025, with an emphasis on fostering economic growth. The target and its state justification follow similar conclusions in the 2016 report of the Advisory Council on Economic Growth, chaired by the then global head, Dominic Barton. The Advisory Council recommended a gradual increase in permanent immigration to 450,000 people per year to respond to labour market dynamics. At the time, Canada was accepting about 320,000 permanent residents. John McCallum, the immigration minister at the time, expressed his reservations about the huge figure presented in this report. But one of the sources at IRCC said the department was quickly told that the Advisory Council's report was a foundational plan. So again, why doesn't the department have the capacity or the expertise to set policy around immigration targets rather than the need to be recommended by McKinsey? Again, Minister, it's stated in reporting by the CBC that it is not the Department of Immigration that was setting this policy, it was McKinsey.
Well, with great respect, Ms. Kuzi, as the person who sets these policies, I can tell you that I wasn't informed by McKinsey's work and didn't meet with them in my development of this past year's immigration levels plan. As I mentioned during my opening remarks, this is driven by the need for businesses to find workers, to identify the skills that will be necessary to grow the Canadian economy for the next generation, and to make sure we're doing what we can to continue to be a leader on humanitarian issues and reuniting families. The allegation that McKinsey is making decisions around immigration levels policy is false. The truth is that there were two contracts between 2018 and 2020 that were geared towards improvements to the digital processing of cases and movement towards a fully digitized system at IRCC. But it is not a true allegation that McKinsey has somehow been able to set the federal government's immigration.
Then, Minister, you're going against the words of your public servants. You're going against what they are saying to the media. You're going against what the media is reporting. And frankly, after seeing the way your government just voted in the House on C-290, it's not very surprising. It's not surprising. And I see the member who passed the PMB is agreeing with that. This is not surprising, considering the response that we saw from that poor gentleman from Afghanistan in the chamber last week. It's not surprising to me that you're disregarding the words of your public servants. You are also contrasting the words of not only your predecessor, Minister McCallum, you're also contrasting the words of the former finance minister, Bill Morneau, who also said in his book, we developed a number of good ideas and concepts. They included setting immigration targets and expanding the number of scientists available to work on new developments that could either support existing economic activities or inspire new ones. So you're saying one thing, Minister, your public servants, the media, and your predecessors are saying something else.
I don't believe there was a question in that intervention, Mr. Chair. My honest belief is that Canada needs more people. I make this argument at every instance I have in public, including at an event with the Construction Association of Nova Scotia this morning. The reasons we need more people are largely driven by economics and demographics that I am concerned about. With respect, there are many thousands of people who work in the department, the most senior.
They're driven by outside consultants, including McKinsey. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair, it's hard to understand.
Yeah, I'm afraid, Minister, I'm afraid that is our time, but I'm sure your colleague will allow you the opportunity. Mr. Jouari, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Minister. Welcome, the officials. Minister, thank you very much for all the work that you're doing and addressing some of the challenging, helping us navigate through some of the challenging times. Minister, I'm going to ask questions that you've already addressed, a lot of them in your opening remarks, but consider this as an opportunity to expand, to clarify, and to solidify your response as just for the record one more time. Minister, why, in your opinion, was McKinsey hired prior to you assuming this role, and what role was it playing for the department?
Look, thanks for the question. I think it was straightforwardly explained in my introductory remarks, but for the sake of clarity, McKinsey was engaged in 2018 and 2020 for particular kinds of work. First, to assess the processes internally on how we deal with cases that come through the department, and to help develop a strategy that would allow us to move towards a digital system. Subsequent to the initial work that was performed, McKinsey was retained again to actually help build capacity within IRCC so we could do the work ourselves going forward to implement digital transformation that they helped develop the guidelines around process for. What's important is that we understand it's ordinary for federal departments and public servants at different levels to engage consulting firms. But it's really also important to understand that this is not a displacement of the work that the public service does. When you want to deal with a time-limited initiative without expanding the overall size of the public service, that could be one reason to think about using an external group. But the other reason that I think is essential to understand is that it's appropriate to do so when you could use additional skills that may not currently be present within the department. Now, there are tremendously talented public servants who have digital skills, but the retention of Mackenzie actually helped us grow that pool of talent to position us better as we migrate from a largely paper-based system towards a digital system. We're starting to see certain digital features roll out, and over the next few years, we'll have a fully digital system at IRCC.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to get your input on another thought. As an MP who has a lot of immigration cases coming to his office, and I've been there for 7 years, I've seen the challenges that we've had. The levels have increased, the complexity of the cases has increased, and the demand has increased. Is it possible, trying to put the previous Minister of Immigration, although it goes way back, into perspective, had we not done anything, had we not changed our processes, had we not moved on the digital transformation that your department, your ministry is embarking, would we be in a position to be able to accept the number of immigrants that we are accepting to be able to deal with the shortages that we are having?
Look, we live in a very different world than when we first were elected in 2015, Mr. Jahari. The reality is that the volume of work that we're doing at IRCC, not just in our immigration levels plan, which processes permanent residents, but also with the significant expansion of the international student program and the increased reliance on people here with a temporary status to work. And frankly, the fact that Canada has become a major destination for visitors around the world, there's no way that we would be able to meet the demands of the system. In particular, there's a major thing has happened between then and now. The COVID-19 pandemic had a severe impact on the immigration system. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that when you close a border to protect the public health against the spread of a virus, you can have an impact on the folks who are involved in bringing people across those borders. What has happened is we, for a period of time, had to stop hosting citizenship ceremonies, for example. Part of the work that was informed by Mackenzie helped us evolve the digitization of the citizenship program, and now we're producing record numbers of citizenship grants on a monthly basis. It's just one example of the kinds of efficiencies that we're starting to see now across different immigration streams, and if we want to continue to grow our immigration ambition, which I believe is a good thing for Canada, we're going to need to embrace digital technologies as a government that wants to do business in the 21st century.
Thank you, Minister. With about a minute and 15 seconds left, I'm going to ask a lot of rapid questions. You've already responded to that. Just want to get it on the record. Did you or any of your ministry staff at any time met with Mackenzie during the time that they were providing their services?
I haven't personally. I would have to get back to you to see if there were any other meetings, and perhaps in the next round I could point to our deputy to ask about engagement with the department.
You were very clear on this, and I'm going to ask again. Did any time the output of the work that Mackenzie was hired influence any decision that you have made during your ministry, serving as a minister, currently, I would dare to say in the past and in the future?
It has helped set the stage for policies towards movement from a legacy-based, paper-based system towards a digital system, but only on the processes. For my part, the immigration policies around how many people should be welcomed or changes to specific programs, those have not been informed by the work that Mackenzie was contracted to perform.
My last question is...
No, I'm afraid that was your last question.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Thank you.
Mr. Garan, for you for 6 minutes, but before we do, I want to congratulate you on the passing of your private member's bill regarding protection of whistleblowers. I do have to say, as someone who worked on the original study from OGGO, I was extremely disappointed that those who worked on it from our government side refused to vote for it, but I'm very pleased that it passed. It'll be fantastic for whistleblowers. Thank you, sir. Go ahead for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est toujours un plaisir.
Thank you, Chair. It's always a pleasure to work for greater integrity in the public sector. Minister. McKinsey's Enron scandal, commercial paper, corruption in South Africa, the tobacco industry in the U.S. and defendants of their lobby. There's Saudi Arabia, opioid crisis in the U.S., turbocharge the opioid sales, illegal occupation, involvement in the presidential campaign in France, working for the Chinese army at the same time as working for the U.S. Army in Taiwan. You're confirming that these people were in your department giving you advice on how to operationalize policies in your department, and you're comfortable with that?
Some of the examples that you listed obviously touch on questionable facts, factual circumstances.
Monsieur le ministre, la question.
Minister, the question is clear. You are comfortable having those people in your department and having them access information? It's a yes or no question.
Look, with respect, I disagree, and I realize you're trying to have some gotcha moment. The reality is when you start to paint people with a brush that work for a particular company in another jurisdiction, I think sometimes you give an excuse for the bad actors to get away with not being held responsible for their own activities.
On note, Monsieur le Président. Non, Monsieur le Président, je vais.
Chair, I would like to manage my time. We're noting, Chair, please, Chair. Chair. Frankly, come on.
Monsieur le Président, j'ai.
Chair, I have lost 20 seconds. I understand that the minister disagrees with the facts. I accept that. That's his position. Officials working in your department told the media that they were uncomfortable with the new immigration targets, and they resisted them, and they said that people working for McKinsey within the department exerted influence. Who was right? You, your official version, or the people working within the machine?
First, Mr. Chair, if it means I need to extend my appearance by 30 seconds so we can have a conversation where we don't speak over one another, it's just difficult in a virtual environment. I mean no offense to my colleague. On the substance, I can assure you, from my perspective, as the person who holds the pen in designing the immigration levels plan, the influence that was exerted upon me was by the Canadian business community, workers who were concerned that they wouldn't have a job if their employer closed, communities who were worried about seeing young people move away like the ones that I come from. It's provincial governments, territorial governments, and other organizations. But I don't believe that there was internal pressure from McKinsey that influenced my immigration level plan one bit.
Merci, Monsieur. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. So the minister is confirming that officials were not telling the truth? No, you didn't understand to oppose the amendment to the law that would have improved the protection of whistleblowers. You're comfortable with that? You feel that it's a good practice to not protect them better for a more transparent public service?
Sorry, I think the member is conflating multiple issues here. I make no allegations about officials who've not been named who've suggested that they were in disagreement with my immigration levels plan. If you're interested on the perspective of the department's officials, we have some sitting in the room with you. To our deputy, if you'd like to interject to present the views of the
Monsieur le Président, le ministre n'a pas compris la.
Chair, the minister has not understood the question. Perhaps if he spoke better French, it would be easier. You've just... Chair, I hope that you're going to intervene on that point.
No, it is the member's time, and you know,
It's the member's time, but
please,
the quorum. Come on.
Mr. Housefather, but it is the member's time. Allow him to continue.
Le député de Mont-Royal et le français.
Member from Mount Royal in French.
Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, on another topic, at the last meeting we met with these ombudsmen for supply. And we said if the minister had granted a contract which gave outsourcing to work to be done for which we have a competent public service capable of doing the work, the special role of auditor, does that give you an opportunity to identify this? And what the ombudsman said is that his job is to audit, if need be, if there is redundancy done according to the rules, but that nobody in the government could check as to whether within your department we subcontracted work to McKinsey for which we already had officials. Are you comfortable with the fact that there is no audit role, complete audit role, granted as of now? And I'm not the one who's making this up. The ombudsman came and told this to us two days ago.
Monsieur le Président, avant de commencer,
Chair, before beginning, it's a great pleasure for me to learn French. And after my promotion to this position, it's a new language for me, but the progress is there, and I will continue to study French. Members have the privilege of speaking the language of their choice, and in very technical topics, it's important for me to offer explanations in my mother tongue, my first language.
I will continue to work to improve my French, and if the honourable member would like to engage me in that practice as some of his colleagues do.
Donc, votre réponse à la question, monsieur.
And your answer to the question, Minister.
His question. I think it's important that we come to understand the reason that the engagement of McKinsey took place was in large part to expand the capacity of the department when it comes to offering the transformation towards digital services. Should people disagree with me on that, they're free to do so. But I don't view the award that was granted back in 2020 to be one that reflected redundancies that existed within the department already.
You have about 30 seconds, Mr. Graham.
C'est dans la pratique de McKinsey,
When McKinsey goes to clients, they don't put their logos on all the documents, and sometimes they use the Canadian government logo. They change the department name when they produce a document. Could you confirm, can you solemnly affirm that everything produced by McKinsey for the contracts with your departments, and on every document, they, in fact, identified their logo, and in no case is there a document produced with the logo of the Government of Canada, whereas said document was produced by McKinsey?
Ask for a very, very brief
Mr.
answer,
Chair,
or perhaps the next round.
To examine the logos on all of the documents that exist within IRCC.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Kwan, welcome to OGGO. 6 minutes for you, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Minister and officials for appearing before the committee. I just want to establish the process with respect to policy decisions. I fully anticipate and expect that it's the minister who makes these decisions. However, before the minister does, often officials will provide briefing documents and recommendations to the minister's consideration. Is that the case for the immigration levels numbers or any other policy within IRCC?
Just Ms. Kwan, I want to make sure I answer your question, and I will, if I need to extend to make sure I don't dodge it on you here, I'd be happy to. The policy process, of course, it comes to me. At the end of the day, my signature goes on whatever policy decisions we take. Sometimes there are delegated authorities to departments, but it's common for us to receive advice from different groups that could lead to recommendations. That is not a unique practice. And in addition to whatever exercise the department may undertake, I will, on many occasions, engage with stakeholders or partners directly.
Thank you. So then my question is this. Did at any point in time McKinsey engage in discussions or meetings with officials where they might have actually discussed policy decisions or done work that would have implication for policy decisions? And to that end, could the minister provide a list of the officials that have actually met with McKinsey and what topic did they discuss?
I think my deputy ministers in the room who would be better positioned to discuss engagement at an officials level with McKinsey.
Maybe the easiest thing is if there's such a list, we can actually receive that list of where McKinsey had engaged in discussions with officials and to provide that list and what topic did they discuss, if we can receive that. So my next question to the minister is this. The minister actually said that there wasn't the capacity or that they needed McKinsey to help build capacity within IRCC. Yet IRCC staff within the department is on the public record to say that the matter is that they offer to work with the government with ideas and forwarded these ideas, and there was zero uptick. And so IRCC, by the way, is the one department within government that contracts out more work than any other department. And that has been confirmed with the 5C report. The other thing that has been noted is that IRCC does not make reasonable effort to hire before contracting out, and that IRCC has more grievances than any other department within government. So this is on a public record report that's there for everyone to see. So given the comment that people try to actually offer the ideas and suggestions, it was actually not received well and not taken up. Why?
Look, I have a different view, with great respect, Ms. Kwan, and both on your allegation about our being slow to hire, but also on the interplay between McKinsey and officials within the department. Just to be a little bit more specific, my view, of course, coming in after some of the work was performed, is that the collaboration that took place between the consulting firm, the department, actually did help grow the capacity. We're starting to see some of the work that has come about as a result of the groundwork that was done a few years ago to result in new digital processes. With respect to the allegation about being slow to hire, since the past summer, we've hired more than 1,200.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt
people
here,
with hundreds more
Minister.
coming.
I think you might have misheard me. It wasn't slow to hire. The issue is that the government and the department chose to contract out instead of hiring in-house. And in fact, there's a report here, and I'll turn the minister to this attention, the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada contracting out report. And in this report, it actually outlines very clearly the contracting out of IRCC. And how it is actually breaching the collective agreement, by the way, and the number of grievances that exists within the system. So that's there on the record. And sources, it has been reported by CBC that staff within IRCC had offered to work with the department on some of these issues, and yet that offer was not taken up. So I think the point here is this. There is a problem, a systemic problem, I would suggest, within IRCC then, where the workers is not being valued. And we're not sort of utilizing the talent from within. And there needs to be an explanation as to why the level of contracting out that IRCC has engaged in with McKinsey.
So first, let me dispel any misconceptions that there is somehow not respect for the public service. They are doing extraordinary work under very difficult circumstances, particularly over the past few years. We ask an awful lot of them as we seek to grow our immigration ambition, and I'm grateful for the work that they do. With respect to the specific contracts that we're talking about with McKinsey and IRCC, my view is that there was actually in an area that was both time limited and required incremental work that wasn't within the capacity, not to operate a new digital system in perpetuity, but to help build the capacity to finish the design and implementation of it. The contracts were entered into within the department, not at a ministerial level. If there's supplementary information that the Deputy Minister has on this, I'd be happy to give her time to offer an explanation.
Well, I will say this.
I'm afraid that's our time. We're now on to second round, 5-minute rounds. Mr. Paul Hoos.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Minister. First and foremost, I'd like to mention that I was somewhat insulted on behalf of my colleagues in the opposition by your preliminary notes, the way you said that MPs were making unfounded accusations. So I'm going to ask a simple question. Do you recognize that Dominic Barton in 2016 was part of the Economic Council of the government? And at that time, was Dominic Barton still global director at McKinsey?
I expect the way you position the question, yes. I don't keep tabs on when
Just
he
go for
came
me.
and left a
Okay.
company I don't have a relationship with.
Actuellement, on est ici, Monsieur.
We're here now, and we're not making unfounded accusations. We have specific information. We know that beginning in 2016, the point at which Mr. Barton was on the Economic Council, he was still a global director, and that there was an explosion of contracts to McKinsey as of 2016. We also know that your former colleague, John McCallum, a former immigration minister, mentioned in 2016 that he was not very comfortable with the conversations regarding the work for immigration. So how do you want us to not draw a connection between all of that? And you're saying that this is unfounded. How are you saying so when we say that McKinsey is involved in the work of the Department of Immigration?
I think it's an extraordinary and unfounded analytical leap to suggest that because someone had worked for both McKinsey and provided some feedback to the government of an economic nature, that somehow that means that a different person was in charge of the immigration levels plan than was in fact the case. And I know this because I am personally involved, and through my own experience helping design the immigration levels plan with my officials and my team, I know where the motivation for those immigration levels plan came from.
Mais pourquoi? OK.
And it
Mais
wasn't
je vais vous
Mr.
couper.
or
Monsieur le
Norm
ministre. Monsieur le ministre, je vais
Minister, I'm going to cut you off. Are you confirming Radio Canada International's, CBC International's information? That's not a place that tends to publish fake news. We think that CBC International does not report fake news. So do you confirm that your employees at the Department of Immigration complained that McKinsey and the Economic Council were too involved in developing policies regarding immigration targets for the country, and this was of concern to them? Are you saying that that information is false?
That a department made up of thousands of individuals who have disparate opinions is a monolithic entity that somehow unanimously disagreed with the approach I was taking is absolutely false. It's entirely possible that there are individuals who may have privately expressed disagreement, but my view, and I feel very well supported by department officials at every level, is that we are on the right track when it comes to our ambition in immigration because it's a good thing for the Canadian economy and for communities.
OK. Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Désolé.
Thank you, Minister. Sorry to cut you off, but time is of the essence. Getting back to the contracts, your department gave the most contracts to McKinsey in recent years. We're talking about $24.5 million. You said there were contracts for assessing internal processes and strategies for the digital transformation. What other contracts were given to reach $24 million? I can't imagine it was $24 million for those proposals.
My understanding is there were two contracts, first in 2018-2019 for $2.9 million, which was to do the external assessment of the processes that we would later come to revamp and to provide a strategy and operating model for the digital transformation. The second contract, which is the much larger of the two, was, I believe, $24.8 million that was mostly designed to help build capacity within IRCC to help focus on operational improvements with a step-to-step pathway towards digitization and making sure that we could build the capacity to deliver on a new digital system on a go-forward basis permanently.
Okay. Et combien a coûté le contrat pour...
And how much was the contract to plan the immigration strategy that you unveiled in November?
There was no such contract.
Donc, McKinsey, vous confirmez que...
So you confirm that McKinsey was in no way involved in the development analysis, strategic analysis of immigration targets for the federal government?
I am not aware of any involvement McKinsey may have had informing the immigration levels plan. I've not reviewed anything that they've produced as part of my exercise in developing the immigration levels plan.
Et si on fouille dans les...
And if we look in the drawers and files, could we find a report in your department?
Very brief answer, please.
Look, I feel I've been fairly clear. If my deputy minister wants to take a kick at the can, I'd be happy for her to do a summary of whatever other work she may be aware of.
Just to confirm, Chair, we don't have a report in which they would have contributed to the immigration levels plan for 2022, 2023, 2024, the three-year plan.
Was past our time, but Mr. Kuzmierczuk may give you an opportunity to expand on your response.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, Mr. Minister. And my Conservative colleague again referenced Mr. Dominic Barton almost as if on cue, because I'd like to read into the record an op-ed piece that appeared in the Toronto Star this afternoon, and it was an op-ed piece that was penned by the Honourable John Reynolds, who is a former Conservative MP and also a former Conservative leader, who assesses the performance of my colleagues around the table when it comes to this issue. And he writes, "The attacks levied against him, Mr. Barton, by the Conservative Party I once led are baseless. Barton is not friends with Trudeau. He did not leverage a non-existent friendship for economic benefit to himself or McKinsey. In fact, in the roles noted above, he accepted far less remuneration than he might otherwise have to help our country and our government." And he continues on, "These repeated accusations are not only disingenuous, but speak to a more worrisome attack, an attack on infusing more talent into our government and the public sector. If this is the treatment that high-profile business leaders can expect after lending their talents to the public sector, most will simply take a pass, and it is a shame." And I'll continue here as well. The Conservative Party of Canada needs to ditch the cheap politics and bring forward its own ideas about how to improve our country. Until its MPs can take these steps, I question that they will be taken seriously enough by Canadians. And if Canadians do give them a mandate to govern, who will want to help them? Mr. Minister, you mentioned a very serious subject, which is the challenge of labor shortages in this country. Can you speak, please, to that challenge, the urgency of it, and why it really is an all-hands-on-deck approach in terms of the need, the necessity of Canadians meeting that challenge?
Look, thank you, Mr. Kuzmierczak. The best immigration policy will be informed by the economic context that we're currently living through. As of the jobs report that came out very recently with 150,000 jobs added to the Canadian economy in January, we're now dealing with 126% of the jobs that were lost during the pandemic that have now been recovered. GDP is well in advance of pre-pandemic levels. The rate of unemployment is near the all-time low in Canada's recorded history. But at the same time, there's more than 800,000 jobs vacant in the Canadian economy. We need to be investing in training to have the domestic workforce grow, but we can't meet the short-term needs of the labor force or the long-term skills gap without recruiting workers from other parts of the world. At the same time, we are dealing with a demographic situation that should alarm all of us. There was 57 workers for every retiree 50 years ago. There's closer to 3 today. In my part of the country, it's closer to 2. If we don't welcome working age families into our communities, the conversations we're going to have a generation from now won't be about labor shortages. It's going to be about whether we can afford schools and hospitals. This is a reality that I'm dealing with in my own community as a result of depopulation a few years ago. Thankfully, that trend has reversed and restored some vitality to the community that I call home. We need to continue to increase immigration levels and expand our temporary programs if we're going to meet the needs of the economy and serve the interest of Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And it's clear from the contracts that they are really about service delivery. They're not about policy development. You've made that clear. It's about service delivery. Can you speak to how a company like McKinsey or Deloitte or other external consultants bring value in terms of the transformation that we're trying to undergo here to bring more Canadians, more workers to this country? How do they help?
So this is really important. There is the potential for governments to outsource work of the public service where they don't need to. That's not what this is, in my view. The contracts that have been issued in this specific instance were designed to help us implement a new digital approach to processing applications, to expand the capacity of the department, but also to help the department grow its capacity so it could implement the system in the long term on the back end of its design. We're starting to see new features already roll out, like the digital application process for citizenship and now permanent residency, case trackers that are coming where people can get an update on the status of their case for certain immigration streams on their phone rather than having to call IRCC. We have digitized so many records during the pandemic as a result of the center we've opened in Cape Breton to help bring paper-based applications into the system that will eventually allow us in an office that is having a slow day to pick up the slack and process files that are somewhere else in the global network.
Thank you, Minister.
And this is the path forward.
Thank you. Mr. Grant for 2.5 minutes, please.
Monsieur le Président, j'ai un appel au règlement.
Chair, point of order first, if I may. During my last question, the interpreters were not able to hear the answer, and so we were not able to have the answer. So before I begin my time, while respecting official languages, could I re-ask my question and receive the minister's answer?
I'm sure everyone's in agreement with that. Go ahead.
Alors, je vais faire court.
So I'll be brief. McKinsey regularly produces documents for clients where they don't put their logo, but they use the client's logo. And in the case in question, we probably have McKinsey-produced documents that bear either the department or the Canadian government logo on PowerPoints or on documents. Did McKinsey at any time use the Government of Canada logo or your department's logo when they produced documents for internal use?
I'm not personally aware of them. Perhaps I can ask the Deputy Minister to offer commentary.
J'aurais la même réponse. Je suis pas au courant.
My answer would be the same. I'm not aware of having seen any McKinsey document with the Government of Canada label, but we could look at all of the files to ensure that this is the case.
Alors, je commence mon temps.
So now I'd like to begin my time, Chair. Madam Deputy Minister, I imagine that you are in a position to table here with the committee a sample of several PowerPoints provided by McKinsey to your department with their own logo clearly identified so that we could consult them.
On pourrait absolument
We could certainly share all documents that came to us from McKinsey, and I think that this is already being produced, and we're working on the
Que la demande est faite, c'est
considering that the demand was made and it's accepted by the department. The minister, when Dominic Barton appeared before the committee, he said that when he thought about various committees thought about immigration targets, the issue of integration of immigrants, language integration into Quebec communities was not part of what he was thinking about. Now, completely by chance, your targets are the same as Dominic Barton's. I don't believe that it's by chance. You seem to believe that it's by chance. But I'm asking you, were there any studies that you produced to give us the impact of your new targets on the French language in Quebec? You refused to produce any studies on the impact of your immigration targets on French. Why?
Ce n'est pas vrai, mais
That's not true. The situation is very different with the province of Quebec. We have a Canada-Quebec agreement with rules and the power for the Quebec government to choose each economic person. It's important, it's essential if I want to continue to increase the levels of immigration all across the country to protect the demographic weight of Francophones outside Quebec. I would like to clarify. I like your answer very much, Minister, but I want to be clear. I'm referring to question Q979. It shows that no study was produced by your department on the impact of the targets. You seem to be a reasonable person who gives due thought to things. Why didn't you try to think about that?
Parce que Québec a le pouvoir.
Because Quebec has the power to set immigration levels for the province of Quebec. In the agreement, Quebec has the power to set the level, the demographic weight for the whole country plus 5%. It's possible for the Quebec government to increase levels. It's not possible for me to increase the level for Quebec. So I've been told to be very quick. You're as aware as I am that there's not just economic immigration. Quebec does not decide on the number of immigrants in all categories. So I repeat, why, in the categories of interest to you, when you increased the targets, you did not think about the impact of those targets on French in Quebec?
Sorry, Minister, I'm going to interrupt. Perhaps we're going to have to get to your answer when Mr. Garon has his last round. I'm afraid we're past time. Ms. Kwan, for 2.5 minutes, please.
So IRCC has 327 IT employees, so that's less than half of the Correctional Services Canada and about half as many as CBSA. Between January 2018 and September 2020, IRCC had used 270 IT contracts, but only hired 23 permanent positions. So if IRCC need IT, and so much so for this transformation that the minister's talking about, why isn't IRCC hiring public servants to do this work instead of contracting it out? How many staff, permanent positions, could the department get with $24.8 million?
Just for clarification, and I may have to point to my deputy to confirm the numbers, I believe we've added about 160 new IT staff. This would include designers and IT specialists. But the bigger point to me is not just the design of the system and people who have IT skills, but developing a system that our ordinary staff who process cases, I shouldn't say ordinary, that our staff who process ordinary cases will have the ability to use the digital system on the back end. To our deputy, if there's further clarity you'd like to offer on the numbers, I'd be happy to yield the floor.
Maybe the minister can have staff table those numbers. dating back over the last 5 years in terms of what the trend is and the contracting out dollars that's gone out correspondingly to date. I think that would be useful. The other thing, of course, with IT staff, that includes programmers as well. With my information, programmers were almost 60 times as many as being contracted out, but there were only 2 advertisements during this period for regular employees. So again, why isn't the government hiring in-house instead of contracting out? You're talking about $24.8 million for this transformation. I also want to point out as well, it's the SIM committee. Immigration consultants and lawyers have come up to talk about what a disaster the transformation and digital process is in certain areas. They are saying that they can upload documents, and when they do spend hours doing it, the system crashes. The minister, I'm sure, is aware of all of this. And so this is what we bought, $24.8 million.
Look, I would suggest that we're in the middle of a major transition, and the system we're working with now is predominantly the legacy system, GCMS, that the department uses, rather than a fully modernized system, which will be available and fine-tuned after a few years. I think it's important that we continue to work with those stakeholders to understand where there are
Thank you,
gaps
Minister. Thank you. I appreciate that you can say it's a new system, but the reality is it's not working very well. So if McKinsey was actually spearheading this with $24.8 million of tax dollars on this, is not a very good job, I have to say that. Can the minister advise if McKinsey...
Sorry, Ms. Kwan, I'm afraid that is your time. You will have one more 2.5-minute round after this. We are now over to Mrs. Block, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. Minister Fraser, you indicated that you have been serving as the Minister of IRCC since 2021. You've also indicated that you are aware of the McKinsey contracts. It seems that you would have even been briefed on them. Last Monday, we heard from the procurement ombudsman that there was a contract awarded to McKinsey which had irregularities. And I will quote what he stated. Mandatory criteria were inadequately defined and were not limited to the essential qualifications. When a department purposefully defines criteria in such a way that only one company can fulfill them, do you think that circumvents the open and fair contracting practice which your department is supposed to adhere to?
Well, I disagree with the characterization that the process was designed to result in a single eligible bidder. There was many bidders that were invited to apply.
So you are disagreeing with the procurement ombudsman's findings?
Look, I would have to review with detail the finding to make sure I understand what I specifically agree or disagree with. But I can tell you in this specific instance, it is not my view that the process was rigged somehow to select a particular outcome before it got underway. This was conducted in the ordinary course, in my view, that IRCC would go through, and by the department, not the ministry.
So you're saying that it was conducted in the ordinary way a contract would be, and yet you also said you would have to look into the contract because you had no knowledge of the specific contract that I was talking about. Which one is it?
Sorry, could you? I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you reframe?
You've said that you feel assured that this contract went through the regular processes that it needed to. And yet when I asked you about the contract, you said you had no knowledge and would not comment on a contract until you were able to look into it. Are you in fact aware of the contract that the procurement ombudsman's review is speaking about?
I now understand what you're saying. My desire to review something in greater detail, I was referring to the ombudsman's report rather than the specific contract. If the allegation is that the contract was designed to achieve a specific particular outcome with one successful bidder, I do not believe that was the case. Many bidders were invited to apply on both the first and second contract. In particular, on the second contract, it was important to design it in a way that had a well-established supplier of services who we would be able to trust to get the job done, because this is a very important initiative within IRCC. But for further details on the selection process, I would invite our officials who have joined today to offer comment if you would wish, Ms. Block.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I think what I would say is that we definitely did pay attention to what the Ombuds report was specifically around sort of the restrictive nature of the bid. And so what we did was take a look at, and it was in fact true that the department did ask as a selection criteria that the bidder had experience with kind of client service, digital transformation. And so we were quite specific about that. That said, the department did take a look at the August 21 report from the procurement's office. We looked at where the ombudsman indicated that the department had done good work in terms of detailing the requirements, but also the recommendations, the three main recommendations, which we've taken into account, agree with, and building into departmental practice.
Thank you. So you would confirm that IRCC received numerous comments from interested suppliers regarding the restrictive nature of the criteria that was put forward. The criteria was not changed, and the solicitation process resulted in only one compliant bid, with the bidder receiving a perfect score in the technical evaluation.
I am not aware of multiple complaints from bidders on the procurement, both in Contract 1 or Contract 2. So I think that what we're aware of is in the aftermath, when the ombudsperson looked at our practices, he indicated that there was a robust suite of documents that were provided. The evaluation process for bidders was well documented, well applied. So there was some very positive feedback. And as the three main recommendations were about good communications, perhaps more detailed reporting, and we've taken those into account and applying them today.
So if in fact...
I'm sorry, Mrs. Block, that is our time. Mr. Housefather, for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, a comment was made earlier. I would like to congratulate you for your French. When I met you for the first time, you couldn't say a single word in French, and now you are capable of answering in French during question period, and I would like to congratulate all Anglophones in Canada who are making the effort to learn French.
J'aimerais juste retourner.
I'd like to go back to the question of immigration levels, and I'd like to congratulate you for reaching the outside Quebec target levels. Explain to me what's different in Quebec in terms of the role of the province in determining who is going to come into the province.
Merci. Premièrement, j'apprécie.
Thank you, and thank you for the comments regarding the quality of my French and being able to speak in question period and answer in French. It's important for me, Mr. Housefather, to be able to respond to my colleagues. In terms of the particular issue with the immigration levels in Quebec, like the situation outside Quebec, is very different. We have an agreement with the province of Quebec, which gives powers to choose each new economic newcomer and also provide the ability for Quebec to set the immigration levels. The situation outside Quebec is very different. The federal government sets the levels in their annual plan and proposes strategies to achieve the target to protect the demographic weight of Francophones. Last year is the first time that a government reached the 4.4% goal after 20 years. I think that we will be able to increase the target, but it's essential to be able to promote French language and culture and to protect the demographic weight of French. It's not just abilities in French, but also the ability to understand the importance of protecting the demographic weight of Francophones in Canada. in Quebec and outside Quebec. But in Quebec, the decision is in the is the Quebec government's, and that's based on the agreement. Thank you, and congratulations again for your French. I'm really amazed.
Ask you some other questions, because clearly there's an attempt to show here, this is about McKinsey, that somehow there was unacceptable relationship between the Government of Canada and McKinsey that facilitated them getting contracts. So, Minister Fraser, have you ever been involved in determining whether or not we outsource a contract since you've been Minister of Immigration?
No, it's dealt with at the departmental level. And if you'll allow me, we actually publish lists of all the stakeholders the department engages with for setting our immigration policy level. It's on our website. If people want to check it out, feel free.
The Deputy Minister, can you please confirm that ever since you've been in the department, you've not had any political interference with determining whether we outsource or not and who we contract with?
I can confirm that we have not had any discussions with the minister around who we contract with.
Perfect. And then, Minister Fraser, let's come back to Dominic Barton. Dominic Barton, it got brought up, and we were trying to hear before that somehow Dominic Barton's friendship with somebody, even though he came here and said the Prime Minister wasn't among his 50 best friends, he didn't have the Prime Minister's phone number, never went out to dinner with the Prime Minister, he never socialized with the Prime Minister. Somehow this friendship led to these contracts. So you didn't know the year that Dominic Barton left McKinsey, but he left McKinsey in early 2018. Both of the contracts with your department happened after that date. Dominic Barton also had disclosed that when he left McKinsey, he no longer had any financial interest in McKinsey because he had to sell back his partnership interest. Would you consider that it would make sense, if this friendship was so great, that the amount of contracts with McKinsey increased drastically after Dominic Barton left McKinsey and didn't really increase very much between 2015 and 2018? Just as a logical person?
From my own perspective, there have been 2 contracts issued on a competitive basis since his departure. I understand that the previous government actually had some dealings with McKinsey as well. I don't sense a pattern about his presence within a particular role at McKinsey or otherwise having an impact on this one way or the other.
Right. And coming back, the professional public service is the one that makes these decisions, not you and not ministers.
And that is extremely important to have that continue to be the case.
And now let me just come back.
Thank you, Mr. Housefather.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Ms. Cusi for 5, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, respectfully, Minister, we have things just aren't adding up here. We have a public service that is saying that McKinsey is implicated. We have the media saying that McKinsey is implicated deciding the policy. We have 2 former ministers, one of them your predecessor, saying that McKinsey was implicated in deciding policy, poor policy at that, for your department. And you're writing it off. You're saying, I don't know anything about this. Did no one brief you? Someone must have told you where these numbers came from originally, because guess what? The media and your public service and your predecessor are saying they came from McKinsey. So whether or not you're aware, or whether or not you are willing to admit it or not, this is what everyone else is saying. And for you to even deny what happened previous to your arrival into this position, and I get it. You've only been there since December 2021. It's easy to say, oh, I don't know. Same, your deputy minister's only been there since September 2022. Really easy to say. I take no responsibility for anything that happened before me, because this is the picture that you're painting today. It sounds as though you are going against, it's either ignorance or denial of what the public service, the media, and your predecessors are saying. And that's not a good enough answer for me. That's not a good enough answer for the official opposition. That's not a good enough answer for, I believe, all of the opposition parties on this side of the table. And it's not a good enough answer for Canadians, Minister, that you would say, oh, I don't know. Everyone is saying this, but I have no idea about it. Now, your colleague on the other side of the table is trying to save your bacon while saying, oh, forget McKinsey. We're just here to talk about service delivery. Well, guess what? You're failing on that as well, with $2.1 million in the backlog. So even if you didn't create, even if you did create these targets, which everyone in the public service, the media, and in the former cabinet is saying, then no matter who created these numbers, you're failing. So you're failing not only in the historical background, the corporate knowledge that having been passed on, or not trying to deny it, which everyone on this side of the table and those in the public service and the media believe that you're doing. In addition to that, you're also failing in the service delivery. That is, and there's no way you can deny that, regardless of the he said, she said, John Reynolds said this, someone else said that. You can't deny that. So, I mean, what do you have to say to Canadians when you are admitting you have no knowledge about the corporate background of the numbers and how you came to arrive at these numbers? You just show up here and be like, oh, I don't know. And then, as I said, your colleague tries to say, oh, well, we're about service delivery, and you're failing on that too. What do you say to Canadians regarding both of those things, Minister?
Mr. Chair, how much time do I have to answer this question? Because I would like to address it with ample time to dispel the many myths and, frankly, nonsense that I just was made to sit through.
Sounds like mansplaining,
you have less
Chair.
time with that comment. Yes, I will repeat what I said earlier about decorum, Minister. You have 1:05, please.
Thank you. And I do have respect for my colleague who I've sat on committee with. What I find...
And I think you speak French very well. It's just as good as mine, which is not entirely bilingual, but a solid niveau C.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm working on it. So first, the allegation from your intervention, Ms. Kuzi, that I can discern is that unnamed sources in either the public service or the media disagree with my immigration policy writ large. I don't know the nature of the allegation that you're making. If the allegation is that they disagree with my immigration levels plan, I have not seen a confirmed source. I don't doubt there are some people who have spoken out because they think differently than I do. If you and I disagree on whether doubling the level of immigration compared to 2015 is a good idea, we should have that debate on the floor of the House of Commons. With respect to my institutional knowledge of what took place during my time as an MP before I held this particular chair, I agree intensely with our government's immigration strategy. It has benefited my hometown. I'm very familiar with the policies that have been implemented from 2015 up until now and continue to support them. The particular issue that we're digging in on here is about two specific contracts in 2018 and in 2020 that were focused on moving towards
Minister.
A policy terribly, or a policy designed by McKinsey and executed terribly, Chair. Thank you.
I'm afraid that is our time. However, I see our next up is a member from the Liberal Party, perhaps, so you can continue with her time. But Ms. Thompson, please go ahead for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister. And the Chair can read my mind. Would you like to continue that thought before I move to my questions, Minister?
Sure. So just on the actual effectiveness of the immigration policies that we've implemented to deal with some very serious challenges facing our immigration system, I'm not going to pretend everything has been perfect, because the shock to our system that came from COVID-19, an outsized response to Ukraine and Afghanistan, and the fact that Canada became the most popular place in the world to come and move to seek economic opportunity, it's put real strain on our system. We've advanced policies to put more resources in the system, with hiring more than 1,250 people, to relax administrative barriers in a number of different ways, and to embrace the adoption of digital technology that will speed the processes up. So the figure that Ms. Kuzi raised of 2.1 million cases in the system has actually been dramatically reduced. Since this summer, we've been able to reduce the number of cases in our inventory by more than 500,000. We expect that we are back to the service standard we enjoyed pre-pandemic for family reunification cases, for federal express entry cases. We are very close on study permits and work permits for new applications that are being made. We have some work left to do on visitor visas, which we're working very hard to advance as quickly as possible. But there is real and tangible process that people are feeling in communities. Does it need to go faster? Yes. Will it go faster in the future? Yes. But it's because we're doing the hard work now and have been doing the hard work over the past year, including by adopting digital processes. There will be bumps along the way, but we're doing everything we can to get families back together more quickly, get workers into businesses, and allowing more people to visit Canada for important life events.
Thank you. And I do have to say, the staff in your office have been phenomenal. And in my time as an MP, I've seen such growth in terms of how we've been able to move files through and just the cooperation from your office. So thank you for that. Has the work that McKinsey completed on the transformation process, has that impacted how you've been able to move through that backlog and bring additional staff on? You mentioned staff numbers. So has that report, are you starting to see that it has an effect on the ground, and then what that looks like?
So my view is that it's started to have an impact, but the full scale of its impact will be revealed not fully until we actually have a fully functioning, fully digitized system operating for a few years. So it will be some time to really know the extent to which the digital improvements we're making that were tied to McKinsey's work will actually bear fruit. But the early signs that I'm observing is that, yes, they are having a positive impact. Whether it's from an accessibility point of view, allowing people to apply online more quickly, whether it's giving them information about their cases on their phone, whether it's having a process that allows us to leverage the global network of offices to maximize productivity. There's many, many ways that movement toward a digital system is going to have a positive impact. Some of this work could have been done within internal to IRCC, but it would have taken longer, probably years longer. Given the significant uptick in volume that's been put on the department and the ministry, particularly over the course of the pandemic and since, I don't think the system could have handled such an increase in volume if we don't continue to quickly move towards a more digital system.
Thank you. How long, your timeline for this digital system to really bring it to a place where the processes will follow the timelines that you've set out? How long do you think that's going to take?
So it depends on which stream of immigration you're referring to. So we're already back to the pre-pandemic service standard for family reunification and federal express entry cases. We're very close for new applications and work permits and study permits. We expect this year visitors' visas to get back as well. Despite the fact that we might get back to the pre-pandemic service standard, we can still improve the quality of service clients get, in particular about getting information about their own cases, ease of access to the system. And Ms. Kwan actually pointed out a very good issue that we need to continue to work with representatives on to allow them to have access to their client systems and to make simple edits as things come up. I expect over the next several years, we're going to have a start to finish digital process, both in terms of how we process things internally and in terms of how users interface with the system. But it won't be as though we have to wait the entire time to get to a moment where we flip the switch. We're continuously adding digital functionality to the system as new features are ready to deploy.
Thank you. And certainly coming from a province that has great ambition for immigration numbers, I really appreciate that. So from that space, if we could just go back to the COVID pandemic and the realities of what was happening within the country during COVID, and then also geopolitical realities, how did that time affect the second contract, the recommendations and the need to go back and accelerate the work?
I'm afraid that is our time. I'm in the habit of interrupting the minister today. Perhaps the last round you can get to that. We're now in just to the last four interventions. Mr. Guérin for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, you know, sometimes it's very frustrating to not obtain answers from the minister. And I made a comment, an inappropriate comment about his French. I'd like to say that he speaks a very good French, and I apologize, and I would ask him to accept my apology. This being said, Chair, I would like to know about the motion that led to the study. Among the ministers who we invited, I'd like to know whether we received any answers and RSVPs and refusals. Where are we on that list?
Be a bit more specific, please, for the documents we've asked for or for the witnesses?
No, pour les,
For the ministers to come to testify in the motion, do we have any news about the ministers who've accepted or refused to come and testify?
Except for the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance. Oh, and Defense.
OK. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. If the Minister of Immigration could pressure the Defense Minister to change their mind, this would be an official request I would make. Mr. Minister, I'm not necessarily saying that this has happened in Canada, but I would like to tell you about a practice of McKinsey's. It was in the Senate report in France. It's called getting your foot in the door. McKinsey had a tendency to do pro bono work for the government such that later on it had easy access to contracts. I'm not suggesting that this was done in your department, but generally, if that practice exists here or abroad, do you think it's an acceptable practice?
Essential that we have rules that are in place to deal with how contracts are awarded and that those rules are followed. I'm only aware of instances in a Canadian context where those rules were followed, and I don't know if my deputy can supplement that response, but I'm only aware of circumstances that followed the official process at a department level.
La réponse me satisfait, Monsieur.
I'm satisfied with this reply. And very briefly now, McKinsey is very present in your department. There was advice given and contracts, but they're not on the lobbyist list. Are you comfortable with that state of affairs? Do you think it could be the result of an error, and should it change?
I don't believe it's an error. I think it's essential that lobbying rules are respected. Just for the sake of clarity, the reason I don't think it's an error is they weren't even on our internal consultation list, let alone lobbying list, when it came to the development of our immigration levels plan, and there would be more than 500 organizations that would be represented on that list.
Thank you, Mr. Guerin. Thank you, Minister. Ms. Kwan, for your final 2.5, please.
So the minister said that he was not engaged in any of the McKinsey contract awarding, nor did the deputy speak with him about it. And of course, that is the case. Why? Because the minister was not appointed until 2021, and the contracts took place in 2018 for the first round of the contract, and the second contract took place in 2019. So predated the minister's seat at this table and predated a deputy's seat at this table as well. Of course, they had nothing to do with it. That said, there is a real question, though. The minister raises the issue around the lack of capacity within IRCC and hence the requirement for contracting out. So my question to the minister is, how much funding was allocated within the department for training and skill development within the department specifically for this, and also on recruitment and retention? Did IRCC implement any of the PIPC's recommendations from the collective bargaining process? And if not, why not?
You'll forgive me for not having the information in front of mine, Ms. Kwan. If I could defer to my deputy to provide whatever information she may have, I would be grateful.
So I can say that absolutely we invest into our workforce, both in terms of training, learning, and I would say that part of the benefits of the McKinsey contracts was the Digital Talent Lab, which actually produced 160 IT professionals that now work for the department and have built on the lessons that they learned in the early days into now implementing some significant changes like digital applications for citizenship.
So maybe I can, because I only have limited time, maybe the officials can table the documents on the funding that was provided for training and skill development, as well as the issue around the recommendations that were adopted from PIPC. I want to ask this question. Was McKinsey involved in the IA development for IRCC, and were they involved in the Chinook development?
I'll again defer to my deputy. I'm not familiar with any role they may have had specifically on those tools, but deputy, if you're able to provide any response, I would be.
Sorry, correction. I think I said IA. I meant AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, definitely. As part of the work that they did in the second contract, they were looking at roadmaps and efficiencies in the system, and part of that was Chinook, which is a bulk processing tool, and so that was part of the digital transformation. And it was, I think, we can speak to some very specific
Thank you. I wonder if the deputy can table to the committee specifically the work that Mackenzie did related to AI development as well as Chinook. We were told that Chinook was done by in-house at SIM. This is clearly not the case then. If Mackenzie was involved.
It was in-house.
Ms. Kwan, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. Are you seeking the will of the committee to ask that these documents be tabled?
Yes,
and
I am.
If so, do I have my colleagues' approval?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair, and if I may, for all the documents that I've requested throughout the entire proceedings, if I could have the committee's support in requesting and receiving those documents for the committee's review.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just clarify that definitely Chinook was developed in-house, but bulk processing, AI, looking at efficiencies was part of the McKinsey work.
Yeah, and I think the deputy would also recognize, too, that there were a lot of issues related to issues of discrimination related to
Ms.
AI.
Kwan, I'm afraid we're out of time, but just to get back to your last point, colleagues, are we fine with that? I see thumbs up, so the clerk will clarify. Oh, good Lord, they're right. I apologize. Ms. Kwan, you cannot move a motion, but we seem to have approval from the Deputy Minister that she will provide that. I'm going to make the assumption that Mr. Gord will just take over your last 20 seconds and move that same thing. So,
okay, I
just make it official.
I
Mr.
move
Johns.
that the government table the documents that Ms. Kwan has raised throughout this meeting.
I appreciate that, and I think we all understand the intent, so the clerk will follow up with you, Ms. Fox. Afraid of that is your time. Minister, we just 10 more minutes. I appreciate you staying a bit longer. We have Mr. Barrett and then Mr. Baines for 5 minutes each.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Minister, and to the officials for joining us today. Ms. Fox, nice to see you at committee again. Minister, did you have the opportunity to review any of the issues that were raised when your cabinet colleague, Minister Jasek, was before this committee with respect to some of the practices that McKinsey has engaged in, specifically with respect to the opioid crisis in the United States, their corporate conduct with respect to the location of their retreat in China, near to a concentration camp, or the scandals that they've been involved in South Africa and France? Did you have the opportunity to either watch those proceedings, or you have since become familiar with what was discussed?
I did not watch the proceedings myself. I learned some of what was discussed and heard some other examples similar in kind to those you've listed during today's committee hearing.
Minister, do you support the immigration policies of the last or current U.S. administration?
I'm not focused on American immigration policies unless and insofar as they intersect with Canada's national interest, in which case I am not focused on whether I support their policies, but developing ours to respond in kind.
Okay. So I'd like to ask you about policy at the U.S.-Mexico border. We've seen images over the last couple years of women, children, men detained in cages. Would you say that that is supportable or not supportable in your estimation?
At the time, I had certain criticisms that I spoke publicly about with regards to the situation that took place at that particular moment.
Have you seen reports, or are you familiar with reports about the U.S. government cutting food and medical care to women, children, and men detained at the border, or other controversial practices of the ICE service in the United States?
I've heard some different examples of ICE in the United States, not the specific instances that you've just raised with me now.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, point of order. Is there,
sorry, just a second, please.
Mr. Chair, is there relevance to questions regarding American immigration policies? I just asked my honorable colleague to just state the relevance of that.
I assume we're on stop time. To
We
have
are,
This chat.
yep.
Great. Well, the chair, our colleague across the way, will, if he's patient for just a moment longer, see that there's, as I use my time to talk about immigration policy with the immigration minister on a study about consultants, we'll see that there seems to be a connection between the folks who advised the United States on their immigration policies and this minister's department. So it's very important that there's an understanding that the architects of policies in the United States have been given tens of millions of dollars by this minister's department. So that company, Mr. Chair, is McKinsey, and so that's certainly germane to the study.
Okay, I accept the relevance. You have 3 minutes, or you have 2.5 minutes left.
Okay, so I should have given a spoiler alert, Minister. McKinsey was responsible for advising the U.S. government on those specific policies that I referenced, and some of which you've commented publicly on, and if you weren't before, you're now familiar with. How can we be sure that the folks who crafted those policies are not employed to work for IRCC in their role as consultants?
Look, this is an important question. We have standards that are put in place that allow companies to qualify as bidders on federal contracts. They are designed to protect against certain kinds of bad actors in gaining favor from the federal government. My understanding is that those processes were followed, and I think it's important to not necessarily conflate certain different potential corporate entities or business organizations that operate in different parts of or different jurisdictions, because I really do feel strongly, for reasons that are tied deeply to my community, that we need to be attributing individual responsibility wherever possible for people who run afoul of the rules, and also to the extent that the laws provide a process to punish corporate actors, that we follow those rules. My understanding is that the rules through the PSPC process were in fact followed. Does there need to be work on individual accountability where people run afoul of moral norms? In most instances, yes. But
Okay.
I hesitate, without having full information of the present circumstances, what you're asking me to place judgment upon.
Do you think that McKinsey's an ethical company?
I actually don't think we can ascribe ethics to companies. If you'll indulge me for 30 seconds, Michael.
That would be the balance of my time. So, in giving your,
I'll give you the extra 30 seconds and stick around if I need to, if the chair's okay.
Now, hold on just one moment, Minister. I appreciate that. Are you fine with the minister, or I'm sure you can answer in Mr. Baines this time. Go ahead, and we won't penalize Mr. Baines, Minister, for you continuing.
Sure. Look, this is something I've strangely thought about since I was a kid, for what seems like a kind of technical concept. 10 minutes from where I'm sitting right now is the Westray mine, and 26 men were killed in my community when I was a kid. It was 30 years ago, and I see the families around the community all the time. There was nobody held accountable for what happened at Westray. There was a process that played out. And I think putting this onto Westray rather than the people who were profiting on the backs of my deceased community members is something I take pretty seriously.
Thanks, Minister. And I'm afraid we have no time, Mr. Baines. The Minister used yours. Actually, go ahead for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for joining us today. And I want to thank you for all the hard work you do, and through all the challenging times. Definitely, you've been able to pivot and make sure that you and your staff are getting the work done in IRCC. And I can tell you that the people in Richmond, British Columbia, there's a lot of working professionals, families, and students that are very happy about that, and thankful. I do want to just go back to maybe even draw upon what Mr. Barrett was saying. On February 1st, Dominic Barton told the committee that McKinsey never provides policy advice. They're executing what government wants to do. Do you agree with this statement?
As far as I know, that was the nature of the work that was conducted in the present instances.
Okay, thank you. And then, and just on the contracts, does the department review contracts to assess vendor performance and outcomes?
Yeah, on an ongoing basis. If you'd like more details, I'd be happy to yield the floor to the deputy to shine a light on what that process looks like.
Yeah, sure, please.
Absolutely. We definitely look at our internal practices in terms of how we manage the contract from start to finish. I think that we're also always looking at best practices, either through recommendations from the Auditor General or the Procurement Ombudsman. And for instance, I know that for the McKinsey contract, as a result of a past AG report, the department ended up running, let's say, a price certification process prior to awarding a contract to ensure that we were getting the right price point based on the competitive and transparent bid that the department did. So this is just one example of how we continuously try to improve from a procurement management side of things. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And so how would you respond to criticism that IRCC has enough resources and shouldn't need to outsource?
Look, in the present circumstances, Mr. Baines, we're hiring as many people as fast as we can to continue to grow our capacity. Since August, we've added more than 1,250 with a few hundred more that we expect to add by the end of next month. We're doing what we can to continue to grow our capacity. At times when we have a time-limited need to expand the functionality of the department in an area where we don't have a full complement of staff in-house or need to grow capacity, it can make sense to hire a consulting firm, not just at IRCC, by the way, but in any organization. This has been the practice of governments for many years. This particular example had to do with the time-limited need to help design a pathway towards a digital transformation within IRCC, and then to build the capacity to make sure IRCC could implement the path forward in-house.
Okay, and so you've indicated that the department has onboarded the necessary skills, so it no longer need to contract out for similar service in the future. How else is IRCC building in-house capacity?
Look, there's a number of things that we're doing. The deputy mentioned some of the training opportunities we've had through the digital lab that have now added more than 160 IT staff. We continue to add people at a pace that we've not seen in order to process more cases, but we're also constantly tinkering with our processes to reduce the burden on each case, and then making sure that we provide opportunities for our staff to become familiar with the expectations we have as we make these different policy changes. An organization is only as good as its people, and we need to continue to set our people up for success by providing training opportunities and professional growth opportunities so people see a future for themselves within the organization. This comes through routine training type opportunities, but it also comes from policy decisions set at a government level to potentially give longer runways for the department to plan, which can give security to people that will know they have a job for more than a year or two, so they can actually see that opportunity for professional advancement. There's no silver bullet when it comes to creating a corporate culture to maximize productivity, but investing in people and creating opportunities for short-term growth and long-term, a longer-sighted future with the department is part of the equation.
Thank you. And that's all the questions I have today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Baines. Minister, thank you for being with us. Appreciate you sticking around for a bit extra time. Before we go into camera, into committee business, I just have a couple of things we need feedback on and a decision on, please. Minister, you can hang around for this, but
need not come from me.
Hmm?
I assume that feedback need not come from me.
Well, you're welcome to stay and watch the only committee that matters continue with its business. Thank you, Minister.
Okay, thank you so much, colleagues. I appreciate your time.
Just quickly, colleagues, we've received 2 letters, one from Canada Post and one from Natural Resources, asking for an extension for the submitting their documents, the McKinsey documents. Canada Post has asked for till the 15th of March, and I don't recall top of mind what the Natural Resources one are, but I'm looking for feedback and direction on where should we go with this. Ms. Kusi.
I feel as though the motion was very clear in terms of the deadline. I'm just very concerned that if we start to provide exemptions to certain agencies, other agencies and departments will ask for the same, and I don't think it's a good precedent to set. So I would suggest we encourage the Canada Post to stick to the proposed deadline as outlined in the motion, Chair.
Anyone else on this? Mr. Housefather?
I mean, obviously, I agree with encouraging everybody to stick to a deadline. I mean, given the volume of documents that they might need to get, I don't know, you know, in terms of translation, I just don't know every department is going to be able to deliver on time. I think writing back a letter encouraging everyone to meet the deadline is absolutely appropriate, and then saying, and if you cannot, please produce everything that you have on a rolling basis as quickly as possible, and then we can assess if anybody a couple of weeks later has not met their entire burden and come back and figure out what we do. But like I think a polite letter saying we expect you to meet the deadline, and if you can't give us everything you have, and then keep producing them rolling as quickly as you can, is probably the fairest and most reasonable way.
Ms. Casey?
Yeah, I liked everything that you said. We encourage you to meet the deadline. I like that part. The second part I wasn't as excited about. I think we don't have to be very, you know, we don't have to be rude, but I think that the letter should firmly state that we encourage them to meet the deadline.
Yeah, and if I can interject, I share the concern if we do for one, then it is for everyone else. My understanding from Canada Post, it's not a lot of documents, and if you look at the order paper, it's not mountains and mountains. So I would certainly
I appreciate
understand your
that.
concern that if we do for one, then we'll get a barrage of
It
everyone
was a $9 million contract, so I'm actually quite surprised to hear this information. But that just encourages me further to encourage them to stick to the deadline.
Okay. And I will, sensing the will of the committee, I think we'll ask our clerk to write back asking them to respect the deadline. Great. Thanks, everyone. The other one is I've sent an email out, but we haven't received anything yet. There's the Governor General study that is ongoing. We do require the recommendations, and I just really strongly request, considering the public interest in the cost, but also the recent issue that's come up with being reported political staff order not to answer questions about a different recent government trip, that we please take this seriously and get our recommendations in regarding the Governor General travel by the 28th. Ms. Cusi.
Yes, Chair. I actually have a motion that might address this. That motion is. This is a table drop motion.
Go ahead, Ms. Cusi, sorry.
That the committee requests, 1, the production of all unredacted receipts and invoices associated with the September 2022 trip to the United Kingdom by the Prime Minister of Canada, including for all individuals accompanying the Prime Minister. 2, that a report be included breaking down the receipts by individual and by item of expenditure, including, in particular, accommodation costs, travel costs, security costs, and costs for food, alcohol, and drinks. 3, that the documents requested be submitted to the clerk no later than Monday, March 6, 2023 at 12 p.m., and that the clerk forward them to members of the committee as soon as they are available in both official languages. And 4, that all documents be published on the OGGO website. Chair, that concludes the motion that I'm presenting here today.
Thanks. Peer in order, debate on this?
Just Just a question.
Yeah, Mr. Dory, go ahead.
You've already ruled that this motion is in order. Tabling of this motion is in order.
Appears to be, yes.
Can we get
Mr.
Clark's point of
Householder?
view?
Hey, I just asked that question, Mr. Chair, because I haven't seen this before, and I don't think it came to us. The subject of this meeting was McKinsey. I don't believe this is related to the subject of this meeting, and therefore shouldn't 48 hours notice go out? Because I'd like a chance to review it and understand it better, and I just got it right now.
My understanding it's a table dropped or matter in hand motion in relation to the discussion I was bringing up. Not
that
the
wasn't
Canada
on the-
Post one, but at the...
But Mr. Chair, that was not on the notice of meeting. The notice of meeting was McKinsey, and this has nothing to do with McKinsey, and therefore it should be a 48 hours notice. I'm not saying I'm against it, but I think we should be following that rule.
Bear with me 2 seconds. Yes, a very intense discussion. Well, intense from our clerk, not necessarily from me, because I think I have a higher threshold for stress than our clerk. I am in disagreement with our clerk, but I will take her advice. She has informed me that it's not a matter hand motion. We can put it on motion for notice for our next meeting, which I guess we'll do, but again, I will disagree with my clerk, but she does have a stronger. And she is smarter than me, yes.
Like,
And I'm making her blush, yes. Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Barrett.
That Chair. So the practice of discussing items that are not on the agenda, I haven't been on this committee for, well, not for as long as you, but it seems to be practice that we do this and we arrive at decisions at these meetings that are not on the agenda. So will it be the practice of the committee that on a go-forward basis that's not what happens? I'm
going to ask the clerk to explain the rules as she explained to me. For this specific, yes, all 1,800 pages and in both official languages, please.
Page 1 to 100 are actually the history of the House of Commons, so we might want to leave those out of the discussion. If you're referring to the Canada Post letter that was just discussed, that was related to the McKinsey drop anyway, so it is related to the matter under discussion, which is the study of McKinsey and the contracts. So that is within the realm of the discussion that was at hand. The Governor General's study, which is another study that the committee is undertaking, is a completely separate study. It is not related to the matter that was on the notice today that we are currently discussing, and we're not in committee business. If we were in committee business, it would be fine.
If I can interrupt, at the very beginning of the meeting, I did announce we would have committee business before we entered committee business. How does that affect then your interpretation? Because again, I looked at it as a matter of hand motion. And if you, colleagues, sorry, if you will recall, I did say at the very beginning of the meeting, we would have committee business before we entered in camera in committee business.
We have a notice of the meeting. That notice of the meeting set the agenda.
And I'm sorry I'm putting you in a difficult spot,
No,
Chair, but I'm looking for
ultimately,
clarity.
The clarity that I would offer is clerk wisdom in that I only offer advice and recommendations, but ultimately decisions on admissibility are the purview of the chair. So if the chair does say that the motion is admissible, then it is admissible, and his decisions can always be challenged by any member of the committee.
You're throwing it back at me then. I will just excuse me for 2 seconds. There is the issue that I did mention again at the very beginning of this meeting. We would have committee business before going into camera and discussing more committee business. I think it might have a different bearing on it. Just excuse me for 2 minutes to let me confer with our chair. Sorry, Colin. Colleagues, I apologize, and I do apologize for my lack of education on this issue and the back and forth. I have confirmed with the chair, or with the clerk, talk to myself, confirmed with the clerk, and she has confirmed that at the beginning when I did state it would be committee business before committee business. Therefore, someone can table drop an at matter of hand motion, which was, I do believe it is, relevant. You are welcome to challenge. I will open to the committee to vote on the issue if you wish to challenge the ruling, but because, again, we did state at the very beginning it would be committee business before we actually went into subcommittee. That will be it, and then challenge, we can go to a vote.
Yeah. Okay. Before we challenge and we go to the vote, can you, Mr. Chair, colleagues, we worked very well together. I yet to see a motion that came that had we given enough time to be able to review it, we've rejected it. So you know that. If you look at the history, this has never happened in this committee, at least from the group that we've been together. That's number one. Number two, we just don't want to set precedents in such a way that we feel that we are trapped, because when we act like this, our back goes up. And I'm being very transparent. I know we are public. It's just like, oh my God.
I know. I didn't know John Reynolds had an article in the media today, so thank you for that.
Mr. Shari has the floor.
Yeah. So honestly, we've worked. There is one. I don't recall any member in this committee that doesn't work collaboratively. When we walk out of this room, we greet each other well. We work with each other. We ask each other's opinion. And that is, and I understand when we are in camera, we have to behave a certain way based on, whatever our party alliance is, et cetera, et cetera. But let's talk about this thing. This thing, Stephanie, you could stop me and say, hey, Maggie, or any of our members and say, hey, look, you know what? I'm putting this. What are your thoughts? And you know what? At the end of the day, I guarantee you we're going to support this. Okay? We may have some questions. It may be some amendments. But when we start standardizing a practice of dropping motions like this, trying to get it in public, and not having a opportunity for us to work together, it puts our back up, and we wonder, is there something in there that we got to be careful at? And are we exposing anyone? Are we? And again, all I want to say is, you know what? We work well together. Let's work well together. You, Chair, I know you're going to, place this or pass them. Well, I believe you're going to say this is in order, and I'm going to challenge as the Vice Chair, and then we're going to go to vote. And, whatever the result is going to be, the result is going to be. But my ask is, please, I'm here, my colleagues here, to work with us to make sure that the motion comes in. And look at what we have. I don't think any committee has as many number of studies on the table as we have. And I challenge any committee members of any other committee to come and say, hey, look, these groups have not worked collaboratively together to make sure that they have, and they're addressing the issue of the day. We have 5 or 6 studies that we have not finalized because we want to act collaborative and we want to address the issue of the day. And I'll rest on that. Thank you.
Yeah, before I go to Ms. Cousset, we'll say it has been practiced over the years that we do matter at hand motions quite often. But Ms. Cousset and then Mr. Johns.
I won't say anything. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Johns?
Well, clearly, I would support this motion when it is voted on. But I do want to point out that, I tabled a motion on outsourcing, right? It was a matter at hand, actually, and it reflected exactly what we talked about. And the Conservatives said no, they needed more time, just around the outsourcing, expanding the outsourcing to include the big six companies. So we actually waited all the way until this Monday to vote on my motion, which was a motion that just reflected what we had talked about, that I'd shared with everybody and got everybody on board on. So I actually agree with Majid on the practice that we do. Matter at hand, that's a different story. Clearly, I think we need the documents, and I really appreciate the motion by Ms. Kuziakshi on this and her work on this, because it's really important. But I think out of practice, it is the right thing to do, but what Mr. Johari's suggesting. And maybe she can, because clearly the government's going to get the idea this is coming, that we could put a new date on it maybe and get it passed at early in the next meeting, and then just give them a very short window to get the documents, because this is coming and it looks like it's going to get support and the government's going to get wind of it. Hopefully they can start on getting these documents ready.
We can go to Mr. Housefather, but I'm sensing that it's not going to happen today, so go ahead, Mr. Housefather.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to introduce one element, Mr. Chair, to give you a chance to reconsider your ruling before we actually have to challenge it. So this wasn't on the agenda today. That is clear. This was a McKinsey meeting. Regardless of what the chair says at the beginning of a meeting, you did not ask the committee, do you wish to change the agenda to add something? You simply may have announced it, but that's not changing the agenda in the correct way. So my suggestion would be that perhaps, I think we're all going to agree on this motion. We can talk about it until the next meeting. Can we perhaps have the chair rule that it should come up at the next meeting? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, at this point, with Mr. Johns is not supporting it, it's 6 of one, 6 of the other. I'm happy to have you challenge me and do a vote. It
Sure.
does not, at this point, it really doesn't matter. It will be.
Just say one as a notice.
Sorry, Mr. Housefather. Ms. Kusi?
Excuse me. I'll change it to a notice of motion then, Chair. Mm-hmm.
There we go. I'm still open to have you challenge me, though. Okay, very good. If that's the case, we will we'll suspend very briefly. It's going to be, unfortunately, about 10 minutes, Mrs. Block, for us to get the tech working properly. Maybe a few minutes less, but we'll suspend briefly, and then we'll go in camera.